Welcome back to Watch the Booker Man and to episode number 66 of Paul Heyman's TNA, and tonight is the Fallout to Genesis 2011, one of the most chaotic nights in the company since Paul Heyman took charge. So much going on. Of course, throughout the night we will see the fallout to all of these events, so let's get straight into Impact for the night. And we begin with a good match between Generation Me and the new World Tag Team Champions, the Kings of Wrestling. And the idea here is that, as well as seeing a really good match, we get almost 11 minutes of time for the commentators to just debrief the viewers on what went down at Genesis. Not everybody gets the pay-per-view, so we have to recap the fact that the Kings of Wrestling won the World Tag Team titles, that Kevin Steen attacked AJ Styles, who then went on to defeat Jimmy Jacobs, and of course try to explain what went down in that pay-per-view main event. You'd have to see it to believe it with the amount of shenanigans that went on there. That is the idea of this opening match, and of course, like I said, you're seeing some really good action, Chris Hero in particular, but Claudio Castagnoli is not far behind. Of course, their great chemistry always helps, and that is a really good match with great wrestling and good heat. The Kings of Wrestling defeat Generation Me in 10 minutes and 51 when Chris Hero pins Nick Jackson with an Emerald elbow, with Generation Me being linked to Roderick Strong with Team USA. That's the reason for the match taking place. Following their victory, the Kings of Wrestling are joined by Jimmy Jacobs, and he of course wants to address what went down at Genesis, that chaotic conclusion, and he suggests that Paul Heyman no longer has control of TNA. He makes this a point as if it is a huge watershed moment, that last night was the night that Paul Heyman seized his power in the company. He laughs at the idea of Paul Heyman having anything to do with the New Age. The fact that AJ Styles was dumb enough to think that the mad scientist was capable of doing something like this shows that he doesn't understand the wavelength that the New Age are operating on. Because of that, and the mess that was made of Sunday night's pay-per-view, there is a power vacuum in TNA. Tyler Black pinning Kurt Angle in the middle of the ring, but not being the World Heavyweight Champion is something that he'll get to. But these are very uncertain days for the company, and they are ready to take control if Paul Heyman doesn't. That warning is designed to bring him out from the back. Jimmy Jacobs clearly feeling that he has some leverage over Paul Heyman. The New Age have proved that they can cause a pay-per-view to completely break down, and it's almost saying, if we don't get what we want, we are going to destroy your company. Instead of Paul Heyman, Mr. Anderson comes out from the back, probably one of the last people you expected to see come out and stand up for the company. He tells Jimmy Jacobs to shut his mouth, adding that they can't come out here and complain about what happened at Genesis when that title shot was stolen from him in the first place. He should have been the one facing Kurt Angle. Jimmy tells Mr. Anderson this has nothing to do with him. He calls him irrelevant to this issue and says that if he's got any brains about him, he'll get the hell out of the ring right now. Mr. Anderson does that, but first punches Jimmy Jacobs in the face, knocking him to the ground, albeit bailing before the Kings of Wrestling have the chance to react. It's a decent segment, not particularly great, and it brings Mr. Anderson into the fold in a sort of in-between role. We'll see how that develops. Before then, we get the commentators who continue to discuss and dissect what went down at Genesis, as well as speculating on that ominous warning made by Jimmy Jacobs. He seems like he is ready to take this assault on the company up to the next level. And speaking of assaults, Mauro gives an update on the condition of AJ Styles, who has suffered yet another setback at the hands of Kevin Steen. Taz says that in retrospect, AJ Styles probably didn't make the right call in going out to fight Jimmy Jacobs so soon after the attack, but he understands AJ Styles' fighter instinct. Mauro adds that AJ arrived at the Impact Zone earlier today. He was ready to work, but was sent home as a precautionary measure. They also promote tonight's main event, Tyler Black versus Shelton Benjamin, two guys who were part of what went down in that main event at Genesis, and I think that's going to be a really, really good match. I've said it to steal the show, and I'm hopeful that they can do just that. Returning to the back, we see Mr. Anderson entering the office of Paul Heyman, and Paul quickly asks him what that was all about earlier. Anderson explains that the New Age is out of control, and since nobody else was stepping up, he had to say something. Paul was sitting in his office, probably twiddling his thumbs, so Anderson thought he'd be the one to stand up to them. He adds that Paul Heyman needs help, and Anderson can be his man. Given their history, Heyman can't believe what he's hearing, not only the idea that he'd accept help from Mr. Anderson, but the fact that Mr. Anderson wants to help him. Anderson explains though AJ, Joe, Kurt, all of them are so invested in protecting TNA that they're acting on emotion. They're desperate to get their revenge, but they're making huge mistakes. He's sitting back and he's watching it, and he knows that he won't make those same errors. Anderson says he doesn't give a shit about TNA, but that is what makes him the perfect person. The New Age is getting stronger, and that hurts him too. He's the only man smart enough and level-headed enough to outthink Jimmy Jacobs, and Paul knows there's only one thing he wants in return, of course referring to the World Heavyweight Championship match. Heyman looks a bit uneasy by this potential alliance, but Anderson says that either way he's gunning for the New Age, and it's up to Paul Heyman whether he makes this easier for all of them, or whether he makes Anderson have to go and do it on his own. Again, a decent segment as we lead into the second match of the night. Daisy Hayes is defeated again by Tara. Not a great match. You can see by maybe just a couple of months she's had out of the ring, there has been a little bit of a decrease in the in-ring performances of Tara. Hopefully we can build her back up, because she is somebody I have massive plans for. But if she doesn't get better, those might have to change. Mickie James then checks briefly on Daisy Hayes before joining Tara inside the six sides. For the first time since Tara's brief hiatus, the Knockouts Tag Team Champions stand tall together, raising their titles in the air. Of course, they didn't have a defence at Genesis on Sunday. Going into Against All Odds, we will expect them to be defending those titles. Desmond Wolfe is then interviewed by Jeremy Borash. Just another crazy thing that happened at Genesis was him coming out and siding with Bryan Danielson and the Hooligans against the Forefathers. And Jeremy Borash just asked him why. Why did he sacrifice himself for Bryan Danielson and take that beating from the Forefathers? As Wolfe begins to speak, Bryan Danielson approaches him and he reiterates Jeremy Borash's question, albeit in a less affable way. He asks Wolfe what this is all about. They attempted handshake at Final Resolution, the match at Genesis. Whatever game Wolfe is playing, it stops right now. Instead of firing back as he usually would, or trying to give an explanation, Desmond puts his head down, leaves the interview set. If you didn't know the history between these two, you might think Bryan's acting a little bit unreasonably, but from what we know about Desmond Wolfe, he's right to not be willing to trust him. The Forefathers then make their way down to the ring ahead of Beer Money's match up next. Daniels takes time to comment on what happened between Bryan Danielson and Desmond Wolfe previously. He continues to mock their Genesis opponents, essentially saying that there's some kind of tension there that they just need to resolve, but he also puts over the dominant victory of his group from this Sunday's pay-per-view. They prove that they know how to get it done inside the six sides better than anybody, and of course they do, because they've had more matches in this company than anybody else. Who better to learn that lesson next than a couple of newcomers? Christopher Daniels then invites Beer Money's opponents for the night to make their entrance. It is a couple of debutantes. El Generico and Colt Cabana come to TNA and put in a decent showing. They last almost 12 minutes in a good match, both of them with decent in-ring performances. I was concerned that maybe because they're not as well known on a national stage, they wouldn't get great ratings, so that is something that tells me that El Generico and Colt Cabana could potentially become mainstays of this roster. This was sort of just a tryout match for them. Encouraging signs, albeit with a defeat when James Storm pins Colt Cabana following a DWI from Beer Money. But two new faces. We really do need to freshen up the roster a little bit now, and with all those people in Ring of Honor, why not make use of some of the more talented guys in the company? Colt Cabana and El Generico debuting as a bubbly, fan favourite team, and I really think that with the ability that those two have to really get some good fan interaction, that will have been a good counterpart to the heel Beer Money. They are then joined by Kazarian and Daniels after the victory, ending the first hour with the commentators putting over that they may have got more than they expected from Colt Cabana and El Generico, but nonetheless, they picked up a victory, and decisively so at that. Despite the tough challenge, it is another win for the members of the Forefathers, the group going from strength to strength in their first month in the company. And we kick off the second hour of the show with Samoa Joe coming down to the ring, making a beeline towards the six sides 1 week after he was taken out in the back. That attack we now can safely assume was carried out by Kevin Steen, working on behalf of the New Age, and Joe's out here to call out that very man. He demands Steen comes to face him in the ring. He's done the bidding of Jimmy Jacobs last week and on Sunday, but Joe wants to see what Steen's capable of face to face and not when jumping somebody from behind. Kevin Steen comes down to the ring and has no problem getting into it with Samoa Joe. This isn't a cowardly heel coming in and only taking fights when he knows he could win. He is more than happy to face off and square up to Samoa Joe. The two men quickly begin an intense brawl in the ring, throwing fists and appearing to be on an even footing until Samoa Joe takes control, looking to lock in a coquina clutch. Steen is able to escape the hold with the most basic move that there is, a kick to the groin. He then hits the Samoan submission machine with a brutal package pile driver in the middle of the ring. Samoa Joe is laid out and Kevin Steen heads off, having proved that he is capable of handling himself in a one-on-one fair fight, albeit with a low blow that would be illegal in a proper match. But nonetheless, despite looking lost out there, it is a good segment. Joe, the star of the show, obviously, and doing well when improvising. He's probably the reason for the rating, but this is very, very good steps for Kevin Steen as we continue to try and establish him on our roster. We then get a solid match a good match between Sarita and Madison Rayne, with Sarita picking up a victory over the down in the dumps Madison Rayne. It's not been a good couple of months for her. It's not really been great for her since she lost the Knockouts Championship, but in particular, recent weeks have gone worse for her. She's downbeat as she heads to the back. The opposite is the case for Sarita, who celebrates in the ring. Myro and Taz putting over the improvement that we have seen from her in recent months, and she's seemed to prosper since her transition to the singles division. We then head to the back where Jay Lethal and Maria are discussing their wedding plans. Of course, that's the number one priority for them at the minute when they are approached by Austin Creed and Sonjay Dutt. Two men who have wronged Jay Lethal in different ways in the past. They are tentative to approach. Austin Creed leads the way, Sonjay Dutt hanging a little bit back, probably because what he did was a little bit more serious. Creed starts with an apology saying he made a mistake. He saw the bright lights, the things that had happened to Okada, the promises made by Larry Sweeney, and he fell for it. He was stupid, he was naive, and while Jay was off doing his own thing, he got jealous and he let that turn into him making such a bad decision. He asks if Jay Lethal can forgive him and they can be friends again. Jay Lethal hears what Creed has to say, but his response isn't with words, it's simply to look at Sonjay Dutt. Dutt looks to have something to say himself, putting his hands up apologetically, but Jay speaks first. He says that as long as you're good with him, referring to Sonjay Dutt, then we, Creed and Lethal, cannot be friends. Sonjay tries to reason with him. It's a long time ago. We've all changed as people. Everybody makes mistakes. And Jay Lethal agrees. He says they all have changed and this is in the past. His friendship with Austin Creed, that's the past. And his friendship with Sonjay Dutt is in the past. Maria Kanellis is his present and his future, and he isn't going to let these two distract him from that. The two take this as their cue to leave, with Maria turning to Jay. She feels he may have been a little bit harsh there, but given the two men have betrayed him in different ways, you can't really blame him for being a little bit frosty towards them. In a rematch from Evolve, requested by Spears and Dukes' coach Scott D'Amore, LAX defeat Sean Spears and Tyson Dukes in 7 minutes and 13. Another good victory as we continue to re-establish LAX. We see that Scott D'Amore does some good work at ringside. He's essentially the full-time manager of these two now. I brought him in just for the World X Cup, but they've been putting in, low-level performances, but decent enough that we can keep him around as a low-card team, I think. LAX stand tall in the ring following the match, with Scott D'Amore giving Sean Spears and Tyson Dukes a post-match debrief following their defeat. Homicide and Hernandez each take a turnbuckle and raise their signature LAX gesture as things appear to get heated between Team Canada and their coach on the outside. This leads to Sean Spears stomping back to the ring, Tyson Dukes following behind him, and Sean clearly feels he has something to prove. he and Dukes then jump Homicide and Hernandez from the back. Despite losing to them twice in a row, they clearly feel that this isn't over. The attack is brief, and Team Canada do get out of the way before there is any chance of a proper comeback from LAX. Scott D'Amore is clearly impressed with the initiative shown by Sean Spears. This is evidenced by the smirk that spreads across his face as the three men leave together, so establishing a bit more of a character for these guys, despite the fact that I have said they're essentially going to be jobbers, or maybe that's a little bit of a harsh term, but I don't really have massive plans for either of them, but I do think they can be a good addition to the roster. The X Division champion is then interviewed prior to the main event, with Jeremy Borash asking him about the events of Genesis. He was a huge part of it, not only with his victory over Nick and Matt Jackson, his friends, but his involvement against the New Age on a number of occasions. Roderick Strong says that he was just doing what somebody had to do. Everybody else seemed content to sit back and watch the New Age steal victory after victory, but he isn't. If he hadn't stepped in, there's a chance that Tyler Black would have been walking into this match with Shelton Benjamin as the World Heavyweight Champion, and that really isn't something he could even comprehend. When the New Age stood in that ring on 10-10-10, he made a vow to himself as somebody who had been forced to join that group. He wouldn't let them get their hands on any more gold in TNA. While they managed to take the World Tag Team Championships this Sunday, they didn't get what they really came for, and he's happy he was a part of stopping that. But stopping them isn't enough. He wants to end this group. That's why next week on Impact, he is challenging the New Age to face him and Generation Me, a 6-man tag team match. I've just seen that this is a terrible promo due to his dialogue being a mess with no script to follow. I'd hope this would be a solid segment considering it's setting up something for next week. Doesn't matter too much, but the idea here is that Roderick Strong remains on the front line of the fight back against the New Age. In fact, probably more than anybody, he has been screwed over by them. Long time ago, this is some 6 months ago booking, but he was forced to join the New Age after Mick Foley and Jimmy Jacobs screwed him, and we get the main event. It's decent, good enough for an Impact main event, happy with that. Maybe I expected a little bit better, particularly Shelton Benjamin only getting a 75. The match gets the crowd buzzing, and there's a note that I did that isn't there for some reason, but Charlie Haas is at ringside with Shelton Benjamin, Jimmy Jacobs is at ringside with Tyler Black. When they get into it, Kevin Steen comes out and jumps Charlie Haas, so there's no actual outside involvement in the match, but there's no doubt that that would distract Shelton Benjamin. Tyler hitting the blackout stomp to pick up the victory over Shelton in the main event. A decent enough match in game, but I think in reality this would be a really top level match at this time. The athleticism of both men, particularly a superb match according to the game, so maybe I am being a little bit harsh there. And having served his purpose during the match in taking Charlie Haas out, Kevin Steen remains at ringside as Tyler Black is joined by Jimmy Jacobs in the ring. As Jacobs raises the arm of the New Age member, Kurt Angle comes out to the top of the ramp. The World Heavyweight Champion hasn't forgotten what went down, and he begins to make his way to the ring, with Jacobs ordering Kevin Steen to block his path and take him down. This doesn't even need to get as far as him confronting Tyler Black, because Steen is there, the hired gun almost of the New Age at the minute, it seems, doing the bidding when and where is necessary. Steen just stares at Jacobs though, who frantically repeats his order. When Kurt Angle reaches the bottom of the ramp, Kevin Steen jumps over the guardrail and leaves through the crowd. The commentators are confused and they're not so sure anymore whether Kevin Steen has joined the New Age or not. It seemed a dead cert given the targets that he's picked in the last couple of weeks, but maybe not. More pressingly, the Kings of Wrestling come down. Jacobs, of course, always has a plan B, and they are here to make sure that Kurt can't get his hands on Tyler Black. However, once the 4 members of the New Age and Kurt Angle are in the ring alone, Roderick Strong, carrying a steel chair, runs out and backs up Kurt Angle. The X Division champion and the World Heavyweight champion fighting side by side. The New Age do have the numbers advantage, but with the weapon that Roderick Strong has and the fact that Kurt Angle is an absolute psychopath, they decide that it's best to back away. Roderick Strong, the X Division champion, and Kurt Angle, the World Heavyweight champion, standing tall to end Impact. Hopefully rubbing shoulders with the top guy in the company will be a good thing for Roderick Strong, and I think that is a solid way to end the show. The the World Tag Team Champions, as well as Tyler Black and Jimmy Jacobs on the outside, Kurt Angle and Roderick Strong on the inside. You can't say that we're ignoring any of the champions, all 4 champions in the key main event segment for the show. And a 75 isn't that great really, considering what we've come to expect, but again, it's enough to increase popularity, and to me, that was a good show. I thought we had strong action throughout the night, a few decent segments, maybe nothing that stood out particularly or stronger than anything else, but I do think we've followed up Genesis with a good show. Lots more questions asked, not that many answered. We've got Kevin Steen, what's he doing? Is he on his own? Is he part of the New Age? Mr. Anderson, who seemingly himself wanted to bring TNA to its knees, now looking to fight back against the New Age. There's so many questions coming out of Impact, but we'll now go into episode 5 of TNA Evolved and see what's going down there in the Hammerstein Ballroom. And we begin with the Motor City Machine Guns returning to action after their defeat at Genesis, beating ANX, who have a tryout match for the company, Rhett Titus and Kenny King, the final Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions. And after the match, the Motor City Machine Guns cut a promo on wanting their titles back as soon as is possible. Christopher Daniels is then interviewed in the back, joined by the Forefathers, and promoting tonight's main event where he will face Desmond Wolfe. Wolfe is mocked throughout the promo, Daniels saying that nobody likes him and he's going to put him down in tonight's main event. The beautiful people then cut a promo on their way to the ring, and then once they're in the ring, talking about bringing some much needed beauty to TNA Evolve and to MTV. Hamada and Taylor Wilde are then able to defeat the beautiful people following a miscommunication between Velvet Sky and Angelina Love, and it seems that as well as Motor City Machine Guns having their eyes on the tag team titles, Hamada and Taylor Wilde have their sights set on the Knockouts Tag Team Championships. An interview with Desmond Wolfe follows where he explains that his reasons are his own and he's not going to explain anymore. After the way Brian spoke to him on Impact, he doesn't see the reason to try and explain himself. He's going to show Daniels what the Forefathers are missing and the mistake that they made by defeating him tonight. Returning to the ring, Paul Heyman makes his entrance in the Hammerstein Ballroom because he has a huge announcement to make. Before Against All Odds, there will be a special 9th anniversary event as Ring of Honor returns for one more stand. This show will feature the TNA wrestlers who work for Ring of Honor, as well as the Ring of Honor final roster, and it will be a celebration of the history of the promotion, which last held a show at Final Battle 2010. He's announcing the first match for that night. 2 guys who shared the ring on the first ever Ring of Honor show, as Bryan Danielson will go one-on-one with Christopher Daniels. Speaking of whom, it is time for the main event, and with the help of his associates at ringside, Christopher Daniels is able to pick up a big victory for him. Another bad night for Desmond Wolfe, it has to be said, and Christopher Daniels, after the match, cuts a promo saying that he has exposed Bryan for who he truly is. Desmond Wolfe sacrificed himself on Sunday, but Bryan Danielson is nowhere to be seen tonight. He can't wait to show up at that event and do what he did on the first ever ROH show to the most beloved son in the company's history, and that is beat Bryan Danielson down and kick his ass. So a major announcement on that show, as well as a huge match set for it. Christopher Daniels and Bryan Danielson were in the first ever main event in Ring of Honor history, so who better to be confirmed for that show? And I hope you'll join me for the build to that, and of course to Against All Odds. Thank you for watching. See you next week.